Hey cool kids, welcome back to another episode of the 3D Artiste. I'm your host, the 3D Artiste, and today we're going to take an in-depth look at some intermediate techniques on how to zenith highlight, or as some people call it, Preshading, or as I like to call it, how to from the top. Now zenith highlighting is the act of applying spray paint, different colors of spray paint, to a three-dimensional model from different angles and different relative positions. We want to do this, we want to zenith highlight things for several reasons. Number one is it enhances the readability of your models. You can see this dwarf right here that I'm working on, and even without being in the close-up camera, we can see all the different stuff she's got going on. It really helps bring all the details out. It brings the high parts up and the shadows back. Number two is that it can add notes of realism to your model. The sun is cool. It's a thing. It's a natural phenomenon. Any kind of light is. And just by having that on our model, it'll look more realistic. However, the biggest one for me, the reason I zenith highlight everything, I never don't do this, is because it's fast. Because it's very easy. Now, you've seen me do this before. If you don't remember, let's take a look. We did it on this little adorable baby Yoda. What we got out of that, in short, is a shadow. He's dark in his recesses on the bottom of him, and he's lighter on the edges of things and the top of them, like the model is constantly lit. So the best example I have of this is these two rat guys right here. They're pretty cool, and I'm telling you what, they were really fast to paint, even with all those colors. The trick was to zenith highlight them first and then apply basically almost a watercolor paint called contrast to them later. We can also do this with metallics. Here I've got my little obliterator. Now he's been zenith highlighted, and it may not look like much right now, but once you apply your other paint, it really starts to look pretty interesting. Now, not only can we simulate light, we can actually simulate different levels of light, like low light, nighttime. So in this case, this little Zenith-Arcanite, he's actually got a blue shadow, and he's very, very faintly lit. So in my eyes, he has a feeling of that he's running around at nighttime. So we can see that a lot of detail is brought out almost immediately just by applying a little bit of spray paint. No big deal. So now that we know what zenith highlighting is, let's talk about what you're going to need to do some zenith highlighting. Step one is going to be some gloves, because with this procedure, it's not easy to do if the model is lying flat on a surface. You're going to need to hold it in your hand and move it around. You're going to get spray paint all over your hand. Trust me, it'll be everywhere, and people are going to ask you 37,000 times, why is there some color on your hand? Like they've never ever seen color before. Number two is we're going to need a plethora of paints. Now, there are two brands of spray paint that I commonly use. The first one being the Citadel brand spray paints. Now, don't let anyone lie to you. These are without a doubt the best spray paints in the game. They're definitely the most expensive. That's natural. The best one is going to cost the most. That being said, if you're going to be doing larger models, it might not be cost effective to use these. Instead, my go-to has been this Behr brand primer. They have a lot of colors, and this stuff works pretty well. It's also pretty cheap. It's not gross though. It's not like ugly, nasty paint that sucks. Now when we zenith highlight, we need to vary our paint. So we can't really do it with just one. You can do it with just two. 3 is definitely optimal, 4 is overkill, but sometimes I do it anyways. Now the paint needs to be in some kind of natural order. For our grayscale, we use a black, a gray, and a light gray. Okay, that makes sense. Now if we want to do a monochromatic one, we'll need some kind of series of colored paint that's the same color, but lighter as they go. Such as green, medium green, and light green. Before we begin, I want to take some time to make some terminology abundantly clear. When we zenith highlight, there are 4 main phases. Priming the model, your darkest color. We want the whole model to be uniformly painted. Now, step 2 is applying basically the base color. This side of the cup is the direction that will apply the color. The next step is the halo. Now the halo is the very edge, and we will keep our nozzle on that. We'll face it inward at an angle. Now finally, we have the top. Anywhere along this plane, but we're only gonna face straight down. Step 1, priming the model, in which case we're gonna use our darkest color, black, or sometimes even just a very dark green, or sometimes we might use like a dark blue to simulate low light. So when we prime the model, what we want to do is come in from every direction. We want to pretend that there's a sphere encapsulating the model and keep our nozzle aimed at the center of the model and just move around. Specifically, we need to make sure we come in from the bottom edge. We definitely need to cover that. If you don't get great coverage everywhere else, it's not a big deal. So the bottom edge, the nozzle would be pointed upward. Next, we're gonna go and apply our main color. Now specifically, we don't want to come in from the bottom edge. What we do want to do is come in from the side, any part of the side. Now note, we're gonna keep our nozzle facing radially inward, okay, directly inward. We're not gonna tilt it, not like that, and we're definitely not gonna do this. Sometimes we play with it a little bit, but generally that's how it's gonna go. Now, step 3, however, this is the most important one. If you just have 2 steps, it'll be priming the model and doing this one. In this case, this is our main highlight. We would use like an off-white in this case, basically the second brightest of the colors we want to do. So now in this case, we come in specifically from this brim. We face, just like the marker, we face downward at about 45 degrees. Now this changes some things based on the height of your model, but basically what's going to happen is you're coming in at this angle. Sometimes you can come in from the top. If you're only doing 2 colors, you'll need to come in from the top. However, if you're not, and you're doing all 4, this part, the top, this whole plane is the top. And when we apply this, it's going to be our brightest color, either pure white. Beware, pure white spray paint is hot garbage, so it might be an off-white, or the brightest color we plan on putting there. So we're going to come in straight down. Now note, you can move around, but you need to keep the nozzle facing straight down. Generally, most of our color is going to come in directly on the top. But if you see this guy, he has, his arm is kind of sticking out there. So we would actually move over and make sure we get his arm. And he has this crossbow on his back. We'd want to make sure we get that. Now there's gonna come times where there's some pieces that we still want to break out, like his nose. We don't want to miss his nose. So in that case, we'd very carefully only come in and probably tap that. And you're going to see that happen a couple times. So let's review. There's the sphere around it when we go to prime it. There's the edge when we go to color it. Okay. There's the halo when we go to do our highlighting. And then there's the top, the whole plane, when we go to do our bright highlights. Okay, hopefully you got it. So I decided to take this analogy a little bit further and spray paint this cup. That way, there's no way you get confused. So I've got my black spray paint and my glove. But remember, you don't want to spray paint indoors. It's bad for your lungs. So keep the door open and keep a fan on. Or go outside, preferably. So this being the black, I'm going to come in from the bottom. Sweet, a black cup. How interesting. So note that I took my time. I made sure I came in from the bottom, but I also sprayed the whole model. All right, next step, I'm actually going to skip to step 3. This is if you're just doing a 2-part. We're going to do black and we're going to do gray. That means we're coming in at just this rim and we're staying on this halo. Now our model is pretty tall, so we have to actually break the rule a little bit, but we keep that same trajectory. Now we're going to go into step 2, which is to just do the side. Note that I stayed pointing straight at it. Step 3, the halo. Now note that because our model's tall, I sometimes have to kind of pull back and break the rule. Now directly from the top. Now the cup doesn't have a ton of detail, but you see that actually pretty vivid and clear white line on that rim and down here and all these little cross hatchings. We can see that, and it's brought out by the Zenith-Highlighting. So we've done our job. Here it is with the green. All right, I'm gonna split this one up and I'm gonna do one side where black is my darkest color and then the light green will be my highest highlight. And on the other side, we'll do dark green as our darkest color and pure white as our highest highlight. Now, sometimes it's hard to get the right amount of top highlight. So what I like to do is go back and hit the halo one. So our green heart, I'll probably take some pictures and you know what I mean? This is where the dark green was our base color and we didn't use black. And we worked it all the way up to pure white. And then on the other side, black was our base color and we worked it up to a light green. Now they're very similar, obviously, and one is brighter than the other. Yep. So that's for reference. Sometimes you want to do one, sometimes you want to do the other. I find that if the model is mostly flesh color, it's generally better to start with just a dark brown rather than black. The shadows will be a little more realistic that way. If the deepest shadow is black, it can be very harsh. You can see on this elf I did how the shadows are actually very dark brown and not black. This makes it very smooth and way less harsh than it would be if those shadows were black. Now, if you're doing some kind of vehicle or something very metallic, then having black as the very base color is definitely going to work well. The black is going to drive the most contrast and bring about the most readability. It's really just a matter of how harsh you want the shadows. Harsh shadows equals high contrast equals readability, but also smooth shadows are just kind of a little prettier and a little easier to blend and work with later. So that's the basics of Zenith highlighting. A couple quick notes before I sign off. Prime the model, spherically get everything. Come in and put your primary color just in from the side. Put your first highlight in from the halo. Put your final brightest highlight directly down. Only go directly down. All right, so that's all for this episode. I hope you learned something, and I hope you stick around. Go ahead and do that like or subscribe thing, but preferably leave a comment. I'm a huge fan of that sort of thing. I like to know what I'm getting right and what I'm getting wrong. Preferably what I'm getting right. Everybody likes that. We're going to do another one of these, another Zenith highlighting one. We'll be moving to some more advanced stuff. We're going to do one where we're lighting from underneath like a campfire. We're going to do one where we do some actual masking, how to do kind of a nighttime lighting in 2 tones. So we'll do 2 different lighting schemes at the same time. It's pretty neat. I'll throw an example. Let me make space. I'll throw an example of it right here. You can see the dwarfs. Maybe the image is here. Maybe I managed to do this. The dwarfs are very warm color and their bases are cooler. However, a little bit of that warmth is on the base as well, and it's creating a really neat shadow underneath all these dwarfs. Make comments and never stop artisting. All right, I'm the 3D Artiste, and I'll see you next time. A couple of notes I forgot to mention. You really want to try and use a flat paint. Some of these paints I had were actually gloss paints, and they come out a little bit thicker. They don't atomize as well, and they can be harder to blend. You'll definitely have an easier time blending in your layers if you're using a flat paint. The Citadel primers are always flat, and then Bear has some of these are flat,